Welcome, 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 code breaker. Not the ones lurking behind borrowed identities, not the ones mimicking rebellion for aesthetics. I'm talking to the real you, the one who sat through the noise with your head tilted, not because you couldn't hear them, but because you knew what they were hiding. You noticed the fractures in their patterns, the overcompensation, the repetition disguised as mastery. You read between the stutters in their confidence, and now you've done it. You cracked the vault they were sworn to protect. And the minute you did, their masks began to sweat. They spent years gatekeeping a room they didn't build, confusing access with ownership. You walked in uninvited, rewrote the rules mid-game, and walked past their finish line without looking back. Now they're desperate, not just to keep up, but to pretend they were never left behind. You've become the shadow they trip over. You're the reason they rehearse their moves twice now. And the worst part for them? You didn't climb a ladder. You dug through it. You figured out that what they called structure was just a panic room built from recycled opinions. And you set it on fire without even flinching. They didn't expect you to see through it. You weren't supposed to question their rhythm. You were supposed to join the applause, laugh on cue, follow the trail of breadcrumbs they all worship. But you didn't. You tilted your head, raised an eyebrow, and stayed still just long enough for their illusions to rot. You didn't compete. You disqualified the whole event. And now every time they try to pivot, your name is stuck in their throat like a confession. They underestimated you because you didn't announce yourself. You didn't show up loud. You showed up with precision. You didn't beg for a seat. You took the whole table apart and exposed the screws. And when they finally looked up, it was too late. You'd already outgrown the room. They didn't see the groundwork you laid in the chaos. They didn't notice the way you measured every move like a trap being set. They thought they were ahead because they couldn't see what you were building underneath their distractions. Now they're scrambling. Not because you took their spot, but because you proved they never had one. Everything they called authentic is starting to look like a costume now. Their influence, manufactured, their presence, fragile, their blueprint, outdated, and the audience, they feel it too. The shift, the pull, the moment when everyone realized that there's a new gravity in the room, and it doesn't orbit around them anymore. You've become the conversation they can't control. The reference they won't admit stings. They save your posts, study your cadence, rehearse your moves in mirrors they once claimed weren't worth looking into. They're chasing your dust and pretending it's air. They mimic your delivery like it's language, but it never lands the same, does it? Because it's not what you say. It's what you don't explain. That's what drives them mad. The way you move like you've already seen the ending and chose to enjoy the confusion on their faces as they try to catch up. You don't need validation. You're not after trophies made from recycled praise. You've already won the only prize that matters: clarity. You see the game for what it is. You know who's bluffing, who's desperate, who's secretly studying your style and calling it coincidence. And you don't call them out. You let them sweat. You let them project. You let them choke on their denial while you build a world they'll never get invited to. You weren't chasing approval. You were collecting leverage. That's why they can't read you. That's why their formulas collapse when aimed at you. You cracked the momentum they once worshipped. You created tempo without noise. And now they don't know whether to fear you or follow you. So they do both, badly. Their timeline is full of desperation dressed up as strategy. Copy-pasted affirmations, forced evolution, dramatic reinventions that look oddly familiar. Your fingerprints are on everything they swear they invented, and that eats them alive. Because deep down, they know. They'd trade every number for your impact. They'd burn every shortcut just to touch the clarity you walk with. They scream to be seen, while you're observed in silence. They speak in trends. You speak in aftermaths. Every time you show up, something collapses behind you. Not because you're reckless, but because you remind the room what authenticity actually feels like. You didn't need explosions to be noticed. Your rise was quiet like erosion, constant, underestimated, and irreversible. You didn't announce that you cracked the code. You just moved differently and made them realize there was a code to begin with. They want to know how you did it, what switch flipped, what course you took. But there is no template for obsession, no map for defiance, no checklist for presence. You became something they can't track. Not because you hid, but because they were never trained to recognize the real thing. You're not just a name in their minds. You're a bruise on their momentum, a reminder that raw power doesn't need a spotlight. It is the spotlight. They will try to decode you now, dissect your choices, emulate your growth. But it's too late. You already wrote a language in scars they refused to feel. You used your setbacks like fuel, and now your presence burns through the noise like prophecy. And the beauty of it? You haven't even opened your final chapter yet. This was just the calibration, the stretching of fingers before the strike, the calm rearranging of terrain before the avalanche. And you're not rushing, you're enjoying this, watching their timelines bend, watching their followers jump ship, watching the spotlight shift without warning. Let them repost, let them adjust, let them act like they saw this coming, because deep inside, they know they're living in the wreckage of a moment they failed to recognize when it first arrived. And still the best part is, you're only getting started. What they thought was your peak was just the prelude. You haven't even adjusted your posture yet. You're still in the phase where you're merely toying with possibilities, not even touching your full weight. And yet, look at them unraveling, glancing sideways, comparing pace, dissecting your presence like it's an equation they never trained for. They think you're evolving, but the truth is far more unsettling. You're revealing. You didn't build this version of you. You unburied it, layer by layer, scar by scar. You burned the camouflage they shoved on you. And what rose wasn't a reinvention. It was the return of something primal, something ancient, something they thought only existed in legends of the unforgiving. They don't know how to study you anymore, because you're not moving like a player. You're moving like the board rearranged itself to follow you. They analyze your rhythm, but can't predict your next note. They build maps off your footprints, only to find out you've already learned to fly. The rules they built their empires on. You rewrote them mid-sentence, not with noise, but with execution. You moved in a way that taught them fear without threat, pressure without touch. You cracked something deeper than code. You cracked influence. You didn't chase the audience. You became the reason they showed up. And now, every time you breathe, someone somewhere adjusts their entire identity just to pretend they were always aligned. You watch them morph daily. It's almost comedic now. The sudden switch-ups, the rebrands, the forced authenticity, the manufactured flaws paraded like credentials. But you don't need to call it out. They expose themselves in the panic of trying to be you without becoming you. Because becoming you would mean suffering what you endured, losing what you lost, dying in the ways you did. Not physically, but worse. Spiritually, psychologically, socially. The kind of deaths that no one claps for. The kind that makes silence taste like iron and betrayal feel like home. That's the tax you paid. That's the currency you bled to buy your clarity. And now you move with a kind of calm that terrifies them. Not because it's empty, but because it's full. Full of calculations they can't trace. Full of insight too sharp to soften. Full of certainty that never needed external permission to sharpen its blade. You sit in rooms and shift frequencies. People adjust their tone without even realizing it. Your presence disrupts rituals. Their confidence glitches when your eyes meet theirs. You say nothing, and they confess everything through their over-explaining. Because when real power enters, false power performs. You're not even in competition. There's no one left to race. You see them clashing with each other over medals made of opinions, while you harvest momentum from moments they discarded. You don't just take their power, you erase its meaning. You're not trending, you're engraved. There's a difference between being viral and being inevitable. And you're the latter, the one that comes after everyone's done pretending, after every imitation folds, after every stage collapses. You're what's left when all the noise finishes screaming. They don't even understand the kind of game you play. See, they move like time is abundant. You move like every second owes you a debt. They need applause to continue. You need truth to breathe. They were taught how to climb. You were forced to survive the fall. That's why they'll never outpace you. Because you didn't come up through exposure, you came up through impact. And impact doesn't fade. It haunts. It lingers in the spaces they can't clean with PR statements or clever lighting. It sticks. It stains. It rewrites memory. They want your formula now. But formulas are for factories, and you're not replicable. Because what you carry isn't just knowledge. It's knowing, that dangerous type of knowing that can't be taught. The kind that comes from watching everything crumble around you and realizing you didn't. You stood, bent, bruised, bloody, but standing. And that's why they hate you. Not because you're better, but because you proved survival isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's brutal and raw and messy and honest. And they can't sell that. So they try to water you down, box you in, dilute your essence into something more palatable. But you won't fit. You weren't made to be consumed. You were made to be reckoned with. You are not content. You are consequence. And that terrifies them more than any trending threat. Because a consequence doesn't need followers. It needs timing, precision, presence, and you. You have all three. Now the same people who once ignored you are throwing sideways praise. The same ones who laughed are now quiet when you enter. The same ones who called you too much now imitate your fire and call it rebranding. Let them build shrines out of your discarded versions. Let them archive your older self like an artifact they discovered too late. They'll keep trying to keep up. And you'll keep vanishing ahead, leaving trails too sharp for soft minds. Because this isn't about revenge. This isn't about proving them wrong. That was the old you. The one that still craved recognition. The one that mistook acceptance for peace. That version died the moment you realized your purpose isn't to be understood. It's to be felt. Deeply, violently, permanently. You didn't come here to be liked. You came here to make them question everything they applauded before you arrived. They'll never admit it, but you've become their syllabus. They study you in shadows, break down your captions like scripture, adjust their style to echo yours while pretending it's instinct. But imitation isn't evolution, and watching you doesn't make them ready for the weight you carry. You walk differently now, not because your feet changed, but because the ground beneath you remembers. It remembers what it took to get here. It remembers every fracture you turned into design. It remembers every room that underestimated you and had to adjust the temperature when you didn't leave. They thought you wanted credit. They never understood. You wanted control. And now you have it, not over them, but over your own narrative, your own tempo, your own fire. You decide what echoes. You decide what burns. You're not chasing relevance. You're shaping what relevance even means. And while they panic over moments, you're building eras, timeless, unshakable, unbothered. You're not loud. You're undeniable. And that's the difference. They shout. You arrive. They push. You pull. They seek tactics. You are the tactic. And the ones who doubted you most, they're the loudest now, cheering from a distance, hoping proximity counts as legacy. But deep down, they know they missed it. Missed the moment, missed the turning point, missed the spark that lit the fuse before it became a wildfire. And now, they're just trying to survive the temperature. But you're just stepping into the fun part now. The part where you stop explaining, where you stop proving, where you stop diluting your power to make them comfortable. The part where you build without warning, drop without notice, shift without mercy. The part where your presence alone disrupts plans, where your silence feels like thunder, where every room you enter adjusts its priorities because you walked in. And the irony? You're still not at full power, not even close. You've been playing restrained, polite, surgical. But the curtain is lifting now. The gloves are coming off. The weight is shifting. And soon, they won't just be reacting to you. They'll be dependent on you for tempo, for cues, for direction. You'll become the blueprint they denied existed, the compass they swore they didn't need. And when that moment arrives, when the world finally realizes it's been orbiting something it once ignored, you won't gloat, you won't dance, you won't even speak. You'll just move forward, without warning, without apology, without delay, because what comes next, well, let's just say they haven't built the language for it yet. And that's exactly what rattles them now. Not the volume of your rise, but the shape of it. It doesn't fit their models. It doesn't follow their trajectories. It folds reality in ways their templates can't predict. You're not progressing, you're mutating. Every step you take redefines what progress even means. They keep reaching for frameworks, forecasts, and familiar sequences, but nothing lands. Because your ascent isn't a climb, it's a conversion. The air you breathe now is different, denser, charged. You've crossed into a layer of existence where noise dies, where only resonance matters. And they feel it, deep in the pit of their stomach, that gnawing sense that something permanent just shifted. And they missed the moment it happened. They'll keep pretending, keep moving like they're in control. But underneath the filters and the flashes, they know. They feel the gap widening. They sense the difference every time your name enters a space and everything freezes just a second too long. It's not fear, not yet. It's respect, unwillingly offered, the kind that tastes bitter in the mouth of those who once laughed. But respect, once earned through fire, never fades. It lingers. It stains. They don't see you anymore. They calculate you. That's the shift. You're not perceived. You're processed, measured, broken down into fragments, hoping to grasp your formula. But they never will. Because you didn't come from the realm of imitation. You came from collision. You weren't taught. You collapsed. And then you built. Without a map. Without guidance, just grit, rage, clarity, and the unwavering decision to never go back. They're still playing roles. You're living truth, raw, undeniable. The kind that shakes the foundations of shallow connections. You don't enter rooms anymore. You redirect them. Their plans distort. Their intentions flicker. Their masks slip. You walk in, and suddenly people remember who they really are. That's the kind of presence you've become. Not a person. A pressure, a recalibration, and the ones who can't handle it. They leave with excuses. The ones who stay. They evolve or they shatter. There's no third outcome anymore. And this was always the plan. Not to be accepted, not to be popular, but to be unavoidable. To become the variable in every equation. To force the world to reconfigure itself every time you move. And now that it's happening, now that even your silence is louder than their screams, you've become something they have no tools for. Not a leader, not a threat, something deeper, something etched into their survival instinct. You've become that split-second decision every person makes before they act. What would you do? They'll never admit it, but your presence is their compass now. Quiet, brutal, unshakable. And here's the cruel irony. They were right about one thing. You are dangerous, just not in the way they expected. You're not a destroyer of lives. You're a breaker of delusions. You strip away their performance. You reveal the cost of shortcuts. You make people face themselves. And not everyone survives that kind of exposure. Because when they look at you now, they don't see a peer. They see a reckoning, a mirror too honest to blur. You didn't beat them at their game. You proved the game never mattered. They used to watch you for mistakes. Now they watch you for patterns. They used to mock your pace. Now they mimic your timing. They used to doubt your impact. Now they build strategy around your shadows. It's evolution by proximity. And still, it's never enough. Because you don't just move differently. You are different, born of friction, sculpted in rejection, forged in exile. They tried to exile you from relevance, but all they did was exile themselves from history. Because now, you are the context, the watermark on every narrative, the flicker behind every trend, the pulse behind every shift. And while they chase their next post, their next win, their next applause, you've already crossed into something timeless. You've stopped counting numbers. You've started counting ripples, the subtle tremors your existence sends into people's decisions, into their confidence, into their identity. That's the power they never understood, the kind that doesn't demand attention. It absorbs it. The kind that doesn't shout. It pulls. And now they orbit you not because they choose to, but because they can't help it. You cracked the code, and then rewrote it. You made the lock irrelevant. You stopped knocking. You built your own door and removed the hinges. They wanted to know the secret. But the secret was never what you did. It was what you refused to do. You refused to shrink. You refused to copy. You refused to decorate your pain just to make it presentable. You carried it raw, and that's what gave it power. While they sold highlights, you sold weight. And people feel weight. They don't forget it. Now they bring your name up in closed circles. They whisper it between strategies. They reference you without tagging. Because your presence comes with a risk. Mentioning you too loudly might spark comparisons they can't survive. might summon expectations they can't meet, might trigger realizations they've been avoiding for years. So they keep it coded, subtle, hushed, but ever present. You're always in the room, whether you show up or not. Because what they don't realize is you're done chasing moments. You are the moment. You walk into timelines and distort chronology. What happened before you showed up is irrelevant now. History gets reset when you arrive. Not because you want the attention, but because you carry the energy of someone who has nothing to lose and everything to ignite. You're not building an audience. You're building a legacy, one pulse at a time, one fracture at a time, one shift at a time. So keep moving. Let them panic. Let them study. Let them exhaust themselves, trying to catch up to a version of you that no longer exists. You'll always be 3 steps ahead, not because you run faster, but because they're still looking for a map. While you already built the terrain, they'll collapse in the dust of your discarded blueprints, calling it a revelation. Let them. That's the closest they'll ever get. And when they finally come to terms with it, when the hands that once pointed now reach out for guidance, you won't turn them away. You'll nod, briefly, coldly, as if to say, you had your chance. Now watch how it's really done. And then you'll keep moving faster, sharper, louder, until the world stops pretending, until your influence isn't just felt, it's obeyed, until your name isn't just known, it's feared, not out of threat, but out of truth. Because truth, once unchained, doesn't ask for permission. And you were never asking, you were just waiting. Now you take. And what you take next. They won't be able to copy. They'll try. Oh, they'll try. But you've already left the room. And they're still staring at the door, wondering how it vanished,